I've made a green screen out of 3 lamps and some taped down curtains, so let's see how it looks. It's 3 AM. And while you were distracted, I also redid the entire tile map system again. But hold that tally just a second, because you see, I redid the entire game engine. I mean, it's looking pretty good for it. No more of that dull green I drew, this was done by a professional. I bought itch.io's Games for Ukraine bundle so I could get Baba Is You and Super Hot. And it also came with a bunch of game assets as well. Yeah, I'll be using those. It turns out that someone whose entire hobby is making tile sets is better at it than I am. Who'd have thought? This is actually a running theme now because I'm using quite a few external libraries for my game. It's a fine line between making everything myself and making it in some system like Unity where I'm all boxed in. Never again. I don't want to be like that guy who spent 5 months making his own sandwich from scratch, only to realize he didn't actually like it. Well, I don't want to do that again. Entity is an entity component system. Now, I still have to write the components and systems myself, but as this is used in Minecraft, I'd say it has some pretty bedrock solid credentials. Tiled and the Tileson library. I was already using these a bit before, but now I'm really leaning on them to try and make map making easier. Serial is a... not in the sandwich, thank you. Serial is a serialization library, so it's used to read things in and out of binary files. The way I was doing it before was causing me a lot of bugs, and it might even have crashed certain computers. So yeah, thanks mate. Still aren't going in my sandwich. Sprinkle in some optic for performance profiling and some MGUI when I need to make widgets and tools, and what do you know, it's all ready to go. That's the good stuff. But now that I have my development environment all set up on Windows, it's get that Linux muck off my computer, thanks. Time to remake the tile map system again. You see, the way that Tiles does it is that it loads in each tile set new for each map, giving each tile a new local ID. The way I had been doing it is I would load all the tile sets in at once, giving them a global ID. I would then have to translate between this local and global ID. Instead of just doing it like how Tiled did it to start with, you know, the professional software. It turns out that someone whose entire hobby is making tile map software is better at it than I am. Who'd have thought? Another thing this new method allows me to do is save every single tile into one giant texture atlas, and this helps me reduce the number of draw calls. You see, a texture is a texture. It stores a bunch of color, and then a shader is used to tell the GPU how to put that color onto the screen. And if you change either one of these, the GPU needs to flush its entire pipeline and load in what you request of it. This is called a draw call, and it is the slowest single operation that you can ask a GPU to do. Yeah, so I'm chatting complete shit here. To start off with, I'm using draw call when I mean to say render target, and that's because I read on a forum for the media library I'm using that each sprite is its own render target. That is a lie. It isn't. Render targets are things like textures and the screen. Now, changing shaders and textures don't take a negligible amount of time, and while updating the vertices aren't like too bad on their own, if my maps are like 200 by 200, those numbers will add up. So just as you watch this, remember that while the clown on screen is talking about draw calls, these separate things, these numbers here, are the ones that we actually care about. Okay, back to the video. Let's try and keep that number as low as possible. Putting everything into one texture was sorta glitchy to start with, but increasing the size of the tile atlas fixed it all. Oh yeah, I also made this nice config system so that I don't have to keep rooting through the code to find all these magic values scattered about, and I don't have to waste time recompiling. I also made an entire scripting language myself instead of including it in the libraries earlier, because I'm a psychopath. I've made 2 videos about that already, so if you want to give me that sweet YouTube view time, then which hand should I be putting this in? How do I gesture better? Anyway, going back up this rabbit hole, with everything now just being one texture, we've got rid of one of the reasons for multiple draw calls. So let's just get rid of the other. Let's not split all these tiles into different shaders and different draw calls. Let's just give it one shader. It can take in as many inputs as it likes, so it should be enough. And if it isn't, I can just, rewrite it all again. Wouldn't be the first time. But for now, hey, one shader's looking pretty good. Another thing that I used to do was store the collision per tile. This lets me draw the collision once on the tile, and then no matter how many times I want to use it on a tile map, the collision's already there for me. Don't need to rewrite it myself. Then, when you load in the level, you already have all the collision there, so you can just copy and paste it across, and it's all done. It's great. Except then I have over 10,000 different collision objects. Now, this means that I have to now try and abstract that into a new tile map collision system, because you don't want to be checking collision every single frame. But now I have two different collision systems, because if I want something like moving blocks, that's not on the tile map, is it? And then I need this large, complicated system to merge it all together, and that really just melts your FPS. Now the solution to this problem was embarrassingly simple. Just take that collision out of the tile map. This means now I have to redraw the collision by hand, but it also means I only have 20 collision objects. This means they can just be stored alongside the rest of normal collision. Oh, I also changed the collision code based off this website, and I can now have circles. Really, breaking new ground here, although this does mean that I am better than the Mayans. They were great mathematicians. Maybe I spoke too soon. So I whipped up a little bit of the code to draw the collisions, and that is not it. You see, this collision belongs down here. It turns out the tile sets the object that the shape has to have a position, and so all these points are just offsets from that position. So I just need to move everything by that position, and boom! We have collision. Later I realized that this was still bugged, but the same problem happened twice, making the drawing look correct, but the collision wasn't. It turns out the tile puts the origin in different places depending on the shape. This is why hell exists. I have my tile maps, I have my collision, now I just need to put them together, and hey, I've got gameplay. This is where entity comes in. I can just write some components, write some systems, and everything should be running smoothly. Let's get started with a position component, a circle draw, and an input component. Then I just need to write some systems to interact with it. I also made this fancy queue system so multiple jobs can run at the That's a lot of So I made this queue system, you see, and it runs jobs one at a time on the same CPU core, because why make anything complicated? And look, I can now roam freely about, lovely jubbly, but how about we check that collision that I put in? So I added a rigid component and new system. When you move, if the entity has a rigid component, move that rather than the position. Then, next system, if any rigid is touching collision, move it back, otherwise update the position. And with that, we can no longer... Okay, we can no longer walk through walls. It's mostly done now. I just need an animation system, some stuff for sound, some... Fuck. This is actually fine. It's just to do with moving 14 distance units when I'm only 10 units across. It's okay. A very easy problem that would not require 40 minutes to figure out.
You are made of stupid.
But now I can attach whatever components I want to whatever I want to attach them to, and it'll all move about fine. Tastes like success to me. Next time I'll try and get stuff loading properly, maybe hook in my scripting language. Hey, check collision with that big red button below so that you see that happen. After that, I think I'll have mostly caught back up to where I restarted from the first time, but I am much happier with what I have right now. And then afterwards, I guess I'll move on to sound. Then I have an animation system that I want to put in, and then anything else I want to, I figure out what I want to do. And then actual games. That'll be a weird feeling, but see you then, I guess. I'm going to bed. I made this for like the joke, but it's genuinely a pretty good sandwich. I did burn the bread though.